Hey, let's start the show.
For Thursday, July 8th, 2021. Welcome to This Is Only a Test, the official podcast of Tested. That's from Once Chris. Welcome to a late edition of the podcast this week. I am Norm. Apologies for the minor technical difficulties, which you may or may not heard, depending on whether I have time to edit them out of the podcast. But I'm so excited for you to join us today, listeners out there, as well as my two good friends and colleagues here. Jeremy Williams, repping Star-Lord's t-shirt.
That's right. Hello. It's so good to see you, Kishore. I haven't seen you in forever.
It has been a while. I'm repping my Thanos shirt, or Thanos copter shirt, as it's been known this week.
Hey, wait, hold on now. But yes, for some people, right over their head. For others, a nod and a wink. How was your break? How was your time off?
It was great. I got to spend a lot of time with family who I hadn't seen in a year and a half. It made the vaccine all the more worthwhile to feel like I could do that incredibly safely. Though we made a weird choice. We went to the beach on the East Coast and we went to the Jersey Shore. And you know, when you like watch that MTV show and you're like, this can't be how it is.
You mean the MTV show Jersey Shore?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You lost me.
I thought you meant Boardwalk
show.
Empire.
You lost me at when you watched that show. You know, when you watched that show, you lost me there.
Look, I never watched a full episode, but I saw enough like 30-second clips to get the gist. And you know what? Not inaccurate is my review of the Jersey Shore.
Of the geography or the local culture?
We'll just call it the oeuvre of the space.
Okay. The general aura of the Jersey Shore. Wow, coast to coast, spreading the good word, hanging out with family. Well, good to have you back on the show. We miss not only your presence, but your words of wisdom. Because, as Jeremy knows, last couple of weeks, I've missed hearing the Kishore, the sensible take on the news in the world. Now, you've been out in the world, and I'm sure you've been aware of news, as we all are. I gotta tell you, here in this household, we are talking up Delta. What is the deal with that? Before we get into our usual news and nonsense, talk to me about Delta.
That sounded like the worst setup to a Seinfeld joke ever. What is the deal with the Delta variant? I think the news is largely the same. Like, I think, wow, it must be 6 months ago. I've said it on this podcast multiple times, is like our obsession with variants is not useful to like most of us in the kind of everyday context. What's important isn't that variants exist. Variants are going to exist naturally as a course of the evolution of the virus. What's important is if any of the variants escape the ability of the vaccines to be effective. And still to this point, we have not seen that. With Delta, there was reports that we've seen a slight decline in efficacy, especially for those that only have received one dose of a vaccine that are not fully vaccinated. But when you're fully vaccinated, we've seen some slight declines in overall efficacy, but they're not massive declines. They're slight declines. And so a lot of scientists and public health officials are monitoring it closely. But generally speaking, the number one thing you want the vaccines to do is to minimize hospitalizations and deaths. And even with the Delta variant, we're just not seeing an uptick in hospitalizations and deaths amongst those that are fully vaccinated. And so it just reinforces the need to get vaccinated, because the people that are dying and the people that are in hospitals right now, especially in this country, especially in Israel, especially in the UK, predominantly, we're talking like 99% in many cases, are unvaccinated. And while that doesn't tell the whole story, like I don't want to get COVID because I don't want the likelihood of having any long COVID symptoms and arrangements. But by and large, the primary thing we're worried about, the vaccines are still effective. Now they're going to watch it closely. What really Delta means is for the fall and winter, as we see Delta take its hold here in the US. We think it's roughly around 20% of the cases right now are Delta variant related. As that number goes up, the increased transmissibility of this virus, which is basically about 2 times the transmissibility of the original COVID virus that hit our shores a year ago, what we're going to see is it just spread faster in unvaccinated communities. So we're going to see an uptick in cases pretty much everywhere. But that uptick in cases is going to be primarily in people that haven't gotten a vaccine. So where we live, 82% of eligible people have gotten a vaccine. In towns and counties where it's 30 to 50%, which is quite common in the U.S., you're going to likely see emergence of new cases pretty quickly. Now, knock on wood, because most old elderly adults have gotten the vaccine in the US, we won't see a huge rise in hospitalizations and deaths, but we will naturally see a rise in hospitalizations, evidenced in what's happening in Springfield, Missouri right now, where they've had to open a second ICU um, for COVID patients, which is something we haven't, had to talk about in 6, 7 months. All that being said, bring on hot girl summer, because we're still in a good, relatively good shape here in the US. I think we're going to see pockets of transmission pretty localized, very geographically localized in the fall and winter. But enjoy your summer is what I have to say. Take precautions where you can. So I wear a mask on public transit. I wore it in the airport. I wear it on planes. But when I'm outside, I am mask free and enjoying the fact that I'm fully vaccinated and all that offers.
All right.
I have a question, sir.
Good information. Oh, yes, Mr. Jeremy Williams over there in the back.
What is the latest on when 11-year-olds can get vaccinated?
Yeah, we don't know. There's no firm answer. The best estimates I've seen is we'll get an update sometime in August, and with hopes, if the evidence is solid, that they'll push for approval in September. I think there was some hopes to get all of this done before back to school happens, so that there would be the ability to do that. I'm not getting the sense from what I'm hearing behind the scenes that that's realistic. All that being said, things are still moving really rapidly. So I think we'll probably get information within the next 4 weeks that kind of indicate what the timeline is on that, like rough timeline.
Thank you.
And as the good Captain Lorca said, context is for kings. So to contextualize some of the things you said earlier, the slight decline in efficacy for the 2-dose vaccine right now seems to be pegged statistically from 95% to 88%. Is that correct? And that's based on statistics out of the UK, where the Delta variant originated. So, of course, as time passes and more, the research is ongoing. Of course, all the pharmaceuticals who have the vaccine, who are developing it, are keeping tabs on it, will have updated numbers. But the early numbers, and they still feel early right now, are positive for two doses. What about Johnson & Johnson, which is by design a single dose?
They released information showing that Johnson & Johnson is effective against the Delta variant. So what's important is fully vaccinated, whatever that means for you. If that meant a single dose shot or the 2-dose vaccines. And the 2-dose vaccines are the ones that we just have more data on because more people have taken that here in the US. And so we'll have probably better information about that in the coming weeks. Just a quick correction: Delta variant originated in India. But the UK and Israel have some of the most up to date information on how well this is spreading. Germany just passed the US in population that is vaccinated after a slow start, so we'll probably see more data coming out of them, and Canada, who has also passed the US. So I think with more vaccinations happening, we'll get better evidence more quickly on this stuff. But right now, I'm not, especially for us who are fully vaccinated, I'm not terribly concerned. with the realistic projection that there's going to be like little outbreaks in different places in the fall. But where we live, because there's so many people vaccinated, we're probably not going to see a huge uptick.
I read that I don't know if it was Moderna or Pfizer. One of them is looking into flu vaccines that use mRNA. What would be the advantage of that versus traditional flu vaccine?
Well, so a couple things. So right now, the current flu vaccine is only 60% effective, depending year to year. The mRNA technology platform would allow for faster reprogramming to account for the yearly flu strain that's dominant at the time. So there's always multiple flu strains circulating at any one moment. But what they try to do is be like, this is the one that's most prevalent, and we're going to cook up a vaccine for that. The mRNA technology platform allows you to do that a whole lot faster. And there's the potential that it has higher efficacy just based on how it works. And when you combine that together, it's pretty exciting to see if they could come up with a universal flu vaccine using that technology platform. They're a long ways off from doing that.
Okay.
But it opens the possibility. There's also going to be likely on the COVID front the development of some treatments, antiviral treatments that are going to hopefully be over the counter in the next year, kind of like a Tamiflu for COVID. So if you do get infected, you'll be able to take something that might be able to suppress its ability to replicate in your body.
Wow.
Very cool. This is why it's great to have you on the podcast, Kishore. I feel already better just hearing the information and having the context for it that I can now relay to my family, because they're never going to listen to this podcast, but they'll now trust me as a secondary source now hearing from you.
Ditto.
I also got to say hot girl summer on the middle of the podcast.
I thought you were going to go with hot.
My job here is done.
Hot tubby summer. The big thing on the internet was Teletubbies are now promoting the vaccine, which in Teletubby lore means they can contract human disease. Yes. Important canonical information. We've said the word variant enough in the show now, so we got to talk about Loki, because that's a show all about variants. And I am not aware of the state of Loki consumption between you guys. As we're recording this, the penultimate episode of this season, presumably only season of Loki, the 6-episode season, has just been released. I've watched it. We're not going to go into spoilers, but how far along are you guys into Loki? Because I know, Jeremy, you had stopped.
I only watched the first episode, as I explained last week. My son wasn't into it, and so since we didn't have that kind of hook, I didn't watch it. But I went back and I watched 2 more episodes on my own. And I don't know, like, so yeah, I'm behind you guys. Feel free to spoil away the next 2 episodes. For me, I don't care. That's fine. I'm not invested in the show terribly much, but I like it. I don't see, as I recall, you guys, or I'm sorry, you, Norm, said that episode 3 fell flat for you, that it just didn't resonate. I understand you got a Marvel. It's like you're fixed for the week, and you get a couple people walking around a planet for 45 minutes. But as someone who is now binging it, sort of watching it whenever I please, I think maybe it works better in that way, where I don't have as much pent up, excitement for it. And here it comes. Here's Wednesday. Yes, I get to watch it at midnight or what have you. I enjoyed it just fine. And in fact, there's a one shot at the end of that episode that blew me away. My wife didn't realize it was one shot, but it was like a 2-3 minute single shot, probably edited to look so, but amazing piece of work on the camera people and the actors and the set piece designers. I thought it was fantastic. But I'll keep watching it. And it's a fine show.
It definitely was not a single shot. It was certainly edited together, but that was, I
as
think,
is the case with most
in the series
these days. Yeah. But designed to have the continuity of shot for tension purposes, for action purposes. It was definitely the actions filled part of that episode. I stand by what I said last week, in that this feels like it could have been released just as a 2-hour movie, and the parts that I feel less excited about are kind of almost like stretched out filler parts. Like I could see the 6 episodes of this, some of which are 50 minutes, some of them are closer to the 45, being edited together to be like a 2.5-hour film. And I would have enjoyed, I think, just as much watching it that way. The week to week thing kind of has the set up cliffhangers, and story beats, reveals, which we won't talk about necessarily here. But also because it's only a 6-episode series, it also feels like when watched episodically, it's over too quickly. I can't believe we only have 1 episode left, and they got to wrap things up. Of course, probably tease something for the next movie or whatever happens next in the MCU. One thing that I'm most assured now, because at this point of the show, and at this point, the penultimate episode of Falcon Winter Soldier, WandaVision, the internet was rife with theories about how the show was going to end, mysterious big bads. And I'm confident that the mysteries of the show will be less groundbreaking than what the internet hopes them to be. That the past 2 shows have set the expectation that the way they're running these shows have to be self-contained. They're not going to throw wild curveballs from some random character that they're planning on, even a major character they're planning on unveiling in the future. They're TV shows that have to be watchable and understood for people who are not internet obsessed.
I'm totally with you. I don't think they're going to do a big reveal. And if you think they're doing a big reveal, you haven't been watching the other 2 series. Just at a high level. So I'm enjoying Loki with like an asterisk. I think this is the best acting of the 3 series so far. The chemistry between Hiddleston and Owen Wilson is crackling. The chemistry between him and Sylvie is crackling. Some of the supporting characters, it goes in and out, but those are the primary characters of the show. And I love the scenes where it's one-on-one between 2 of those characters. But this story makes no sense whatsoever. And I'm a comic book fan. I'm used to like stuff making no sense. I think this might be the worst story of the 3 when you interrogate it, because unless they really stick the landing, this story is kind of meandering and all over the place. I don't think it's really advancing the characters as much as people think it's advancing the characters, especially since the character we started with isn't the same Loki that we finished with. So I'm mixed about it. All that being said, I'm enjoying the hell out of the acting, so just more screen time with all of these folks. And if there isn't a jet ski in the finale, I'm going to riot. Like, that's the only...
Yeah, I Owen Wilson's performance is really, the praise is well deserved there, because it's such a more mature, but still very Owen Wilson-like performance, and nuanced, and it really shows his growth as an actor. I think you're right in that the very first episode already set up and caught Loki up with our expectation for Loki when we saw him in Infinity War, and this Loki might as well be that Loki in Infinity War, which to me is a little bit of a disappointment, because we had this chance for Loki as circa 2012 villainous, ready to rule the world, and yeah, they refer to that and they refer to his growth, but he's played as a hero. Played as at most an anti-hero, but he's played as an self-interested hero maybe, but you just don't see a lot of the classic Loki attributes that he brought to the character. And maybe that's because they only had 6 episodes and they needed to kind of establish the ground rules for the story they wanted to tell. This last episode, though, episode 5, is a doozy, and probably my favorite. I think they've kept the track record for the penultimate episodes being the most bold and interesting ones, and full of Easter eggs and the like, and I'll say the actors in these episodes, in this last episode, really delivered.
Yeah, and like I 100% agree. I'll end by saying this: when you look at Loki as a central character, putting aside Mobius and Sylvie, what is Loki's whole arc in the show? Is to come in, he learns about the timekeepers, and his goal instantaneously is to dominate them.
Right.
And that's the part that I think falls flat for me. Is his motivation in this whole scenario that they've queued up throughout the series. Loki survive, and he's supposed to evolve beyond surviving into something more. I don't buy the pressure around him, like the motivation. survive around him. I will say the thing that really kind of locked into place my viewing of this series, though, is I was approaching this as a Doctor Who series from the get-go.
It very much
and then
is.
and then Adam Rogers, a Wired writer, friend of the show, mentioned, he's like, this is more like The Prisoner. And when I thought about it that way, I'm like, oh yes, it's so much like The Prisoner in a lot of ways. There's a little more action, a little less mystery. But the Prisoner is a really good mode for how this show is operating, and in that way, you can kind of understand his motivations a little bit better. But it's still like they didn't quite nail that.
Are the Timekeepers an invention of this show, or did they exist in the Marvel universe before? The three lizards.
They exist, but not like this, and not in the. They're not like a major set of characters, I will say.
But they are an all powerful,
Yeah, they're like a cosmic, set of weird beings that do something with time. But they're not like Thanos, who has had tomes written about him. They're like very side characters.
Got it.
They don't have vehicles. They don't get the helipad.
Vehicles.
Yeah, I agree with all the above. I think John Hodgman pointed out some of the conceits of this show are pulled out of Doctor Who episodes. So there is definitely that blend of Doctor Who. I think The Prisoner is a really good analogy. That one's it's maybe has that surreal aspect. Maybe I wish Loki was more unsettling in that way. But things do feel like they're going to button up, at least for the characters that we see on screen. I mean, they're not going to get Owen Wilson into the MCU, are they? Like into the movies, right? It's who knows? Everyone at some point will do their turn in the MCU. Speaking of which, this is also the release week of Black Widow, and I know the three of us have talked about this being an anchor point of a milestone for wanting to go back to theaters and watch it. Is that going to happen for any of us? For me, I can say, unfortunately, no. With the newborn in the house, we're probably going to pay that $30 for the premiere access and watch it at home on Friday.
Norm, you know very well it wasn't said on the part of the three of us that we're going to go back to the theater. Maybe two of us, probably two of us. I would prefer to watch movies at home as long as they are available. I know I'm in the minority, and that is my plan this Friday, and we are looking forward to it. I can't wait.
I'm also not going to the theater, but for a slightly different reason. I had my hopes set on going to the Alamo Drafthouse to watch this because I wanted like an experience. I wanted like to have dinner and drinks and watch a movie, all of that. And that's not really happening at any of the theaters locally in the way I want. The Alamo Drafthouse here is set to open next month. And so I'm probably not going to be able to wait a full month to see this movie, so I'll just probably pony up the $30.
My 14-year-old watched Fast 9 F9 last night.
Fast Saga
in something called 4DX, which is like
the chair moves.
Yes, an immersive thing. I didn't get to see it, but he walked out of the movie and gave me the review. The chairs punch you in the back when characters on the screen get punched. And the theater emits smells, and everyone in the theater got rained on. And it's not 3D. Interestingly, like they didn't go that extra mile.
They skipped beyond the third dimension,
right,
straight into the fourth dimension. Wow.
Well, apparently that theater,
on them?
Yes, and it can apparently also do snow, and that theater is going to do Black Widow. So if you want something special, you might do that. However, I will tell you that my son said that it was distracting. It was more distracting than adding to the immersion. It was the opposite effect. And so we'll see. We'll see.
Who knew that weather inside of a theater would pull you out of the story?
Yeah.
It's Shakespeare's The Tempest, right? That's what they're watching. That's what it was made for. Is the ticket price like significantly higher?
That's what I expected.
That experience?
$15.
Oh, okay.
So
I mean, if they can get away with a business model for $15 for these added experiences, and maybe like IMAX, and they'll commission special like curated shows for this might be a fun thing to watch a movie the second time or third time or with a group of friends. But I don't see, like, for the first time, just give me that Dolby Vision. That's what I want.
Right.
Best fidelity of sound and visuals. The filmmaker's intent never planned for punching viewers in the back of the head when John Cena gets into the scene. So that's not for me. And this is the new theater in our local theater in San Francisco.
Yeah, you know what? I applaud the movie theaters for trying these kind of things, because it's this kind of thing that you can't do at home that's going to lure people out to give it a shot. I just, unfortunately for my son, this didn't this didn't warrant maybe doing it again. So we'll keep trying.
Let me put out to you then, for movies that have already been released, maybe not to use the full spectrum of the 4D features, but the haptic feedback, the punching feedback. I could see watching a Rocky movie or a Creed movie with the perfectly timed punches, so it feels like you're in the ring with Creed and Rocky. It's like that could be something, right? What's another movie that you could think of that you would feel like would benefit, that you could enjoy having rain or smell or snow or being punched in the head?
The first movie that popped in my head, and it would not be enjoyable, is There's Something About Mary, but only because of that one scene. And I just think that would be terribly unenjoyable.
Maybe Infinity War, right? With the snap, the room gets real cold and chill.
There's strobe lights. There's strobe lights too.
Okay, there you go. Saturday Night Fever with the strobe lights. Disco ball comes down. Right? Yeah, lots of different opportunities for immersion, I guess they're going for. Right? It's like the Castro Theater experience when you go for a sing along. Right? That's about a reaction and audience participation,
exactly,
less so the processing of the audiovisual of the movie itself. So classic movies, that's an opportunity for them to make use of this tech. Rolling on with Disney Plus, there was Anime Expo, real expo. I mean, I don't know about you, Kishore, but I got chills reading Twitter posts about convention schedules, like con programming happening, and people at conventions and here virtually, but it feels like conventions are ramping up both virtually and in person over the summer. Anime Expo was past week, and Disney was present to talk about Star Wars Visions, which they previously announced, but they'd shown now a trailer for. This is kind of like the Animatrix, but for Star Wars. So different animators coming in to do their takes. And it's going to be on Disney Plus, released this fall. Unfortunately, there is no like Gundam style TIE fighter space battle thing, which is what I still am hoping for. But this is all looks like a different kind of Star Wars. And I'll be looking forward to it and checking it out. Also, Disney released the first trailer for the next Disney Animation Studios movie, Encanto. I don't know exactly.
Oh, I saw the poster. I didn't know they released a trailer. Let me check that out.
Yeah, and the cast for it as well, and I think also with songs from Lin-Manuel Miranda. So looking forward to that. But shall we get to the big technology, the big gear news of the week, which is Nintendo. Nintendo announced new hardware, and it is a new Switch, and it is an OLED Switch. And this piece of announcement came out to a great internet consternation and frustration.
I would say yawn
possibly
is more of the reaction to it.
Yes, I think that was probably the initial reaction. They put out a heavily produced, edited announcement trailer showing this. And the details are it's a slightly bigger screen, slightly heavier, uses OLED. Battery life, unfortunately, is not increased by using an OLED screen. And it has, I believe, a new dock with Ethernet port, same processor, same amount of RAM. And it will still output 1080p versions of Switch games onto a TV, coming out for, $350 this October. So the collective yawn is because there was so much buildup and anticipation that people are hoping for a Super Nintendo Switch or a Switch Pro, whatever you wanted to call it, with presumably an OLED screen, but also faster processing and the ability to possibly output games and render games at 4K resolution, as is the standard and the norm for game consoles of this generation. And it just means that if that comes, whenever that comes, and we still hope that will come to the Switch, it's going to be another year before that happens.
Yeah, this is an easy pass for me. I think the disappointment is, I think we had enough rumors saying that they weren't going to do 4K output. So I'd already kind of like let that go. But I don't understand the not upgrading the processor inside. That one doesn't make sense to me. The Switch is how many years old now? The fact that they haven't upgraded the processor in whatever it's been 3 years since it's been last upgraded feels sort of, inexcusable at this point. And so, really, what you're getting is a 7-inch screen versus a 6.2-inch screen and 64 gigs of internal storage. That's not enough of a
Ethernet port.
Yeah, great. That's not enough of an attraction for me to buy this. If I was buying a Switch brand new, great that this all comes with it. But this doesn't get me really excited.
Yeah, but I don't think it's supposed to, and it's not that big a deal. But I'm not surprised that this is what the product is. If you look at the last two, or the last type of Nintendo handheld products like the Game Boy and the DS, they did the same thing. Like they made bigger screens on them. The 3DS,
but this is not a
3 XL. It's basically just a bigger screen, and yeah, I think the OLED is sort of the distraction here. That's cool, but if you want a Switch with a bigger screen, or if, as you said, it's your first Switch, this is a solid product. And the OLED is going to have nicer colors, deeper blacks. That's going to be nice. But this is not a product that you upgrade to. This is just a alternative, sort of nicer Switch if you're coming in for the first time. And if they were to add a faster processor, which some people say they still could do, then you're talking about bifurcating the platform, and you have people that or games that maybe, I'm sure that all games have to be compatible with both, which adds enormous complexity for the developers and unnecessary complexity in many cases. And you don't know what percentage of your audience is going to have one versus the other. So who do you prioritize? And it gets to be a bit of a mess. Can you think of another Nintendo platform that did have a faster processor in one SKU than another?
We'll talk about the Wii and the Wii U, right? Those were, and this, I think that
those are different platforms.
Right, but I think people were hoping for that, and there was backward compatibility and games that were made optimized to run on both. And even when we're talking about having extra processing power, just the ability to do a higher resolution output or higher frame rate, those are things that don't require completely separate development tracks. They do require development and optimization, but I think the question is, was this the plan all along, or was this a plan that they had to end on earlier this year because of the limited supply of silicon, of the chips shortage around the world, which all electronics manufacturers are suffering from, and that's why they had to wait a year? Or do they have information that people are less likely to play Switches plugged into the dock and into their TV? That the vast majority of Switch users, anecdotally, I feel like a lot of Switch users just play holding the Switch as a handheld device, and so the bigger screen and the OLED screen gives day-to-day benefits. But if you're someone who relies on the Switch more as a entertainment console, more as a plug into your TV, I think that is a little bit disappointing given how old the Switch is right now. But I do hear that I think the most of the grumbling are probably from fans who will buy Nintendo products no matter what, and just feel like they're not going to get as much as they wanted to this year, but they're still probably going to buy it anyway.
Well, and they're only grumbling because they, they read the rumor sites and they got invested in, blog posts that, weren't factually based. And, wait for the news, wait for the actual official announcements before you put any stock in these things when it comes to Apple or Nintendo or anybody else.
Outside of the
6
rumor,
months as a game developer, and you've totally changed, man. You're like totally on the side of big game development.
It's been a full year. 6 months.
I think we're all on the same page of probably passing on this and hoping for a better version next year. Next year is when we'll get the next Zelda game, and I really hope the disappointment, I think, also is these highly anticipated games. I want not only to work on the Switch, but to have tangible benefits with new hardware. And without new processing to come out this year, then will the next Zelda game not be a 4K game? Like, that's where I feel like there's some disappointment.
Yeah, for me, this is all about Breath of the Wild 2. Like, I want a new Switch for Breath of the Wild 2, and this decreases the likelihood of that to me.
You think
maybe I'm wrong though?
For my money, Breath of the Wild is the best game ever made, and I played it on the Switch in my hand. I played very little on the TV, so I played it at 720p, and like this, and I'd be perfectly happy to play Breath of the Wild 2 the exact same way on the exact same platform.
It needs a faster processor for the kind of game experience that I want.
Oh.
And because, like, I think if you're going to criticize something about that game, and there's very little to criticize, it's one of my favorite games ever. It is there were some definitely unideal load times. There was some quirks in processing, not when you're traversing the world, but when you're shifting environments, that was just frankly slow compared to modern games that are out now.
Ooh, yeah. Talk about an experience that could make use of 40X. Imagine a 40X tied to a Red Dead Redemption or the Breath of the Wild. You get snow and wind and smells in a theater. And maybe it's like a Twitch style thing where you're just watching someone play the game, but you're sitting there enjoying all the senses.
Oh, interesting.
Of Breath of the Wild.
Oh,
you're not even playing the game.
People don't play games anyways. Watch other people play them on the internet.
I don't need smells added for when I cook dubious food.
Don't you have Rumble sneakers, Norm?
I do. But those are just amplifying the bass. They're not custom.
I see.
It's not a separate track of information. And to loop back in the conversation we had last week about HDR, it does. I think there was some confusion I had about how the data is passed. It is higher bit rate, or not higher bit rate. Sorry, it's higher bit depth. So the output does require it to be shot, edited, and output and encoded in H.265 at a higher bit depth than standard. But it also is locked to, bit rate ends up being key, or the king, and the lowest common denominator. So whatever streaming service delivers whatever bit rate they end up delivering at, it has to still fit within that. And H.265 has better compression, and so you can pack more information. But obviously there's debates about the quality of that versus H.264, but that's where you get, in the same amount of actual bytes coming in through your internet, more information for HDR, as well as a metadata layer for luminosity on a per frame basis.
Did you look that up, or did somebody correct you or inform
combination?
You?
Combination. People pointed me to places to read up on it.
Thank you to people.
Yes, thank you to all the listeners and the people out there. All right, our last topic, we're going to go into some EV talk and ongoing EV quest. We just had it was a Car and Driver that just announced their EV of the year, and it ended up being maybe a little bit of surprise for some folks, but the Ford Mustang.
Mustang Mach-E.
People like that car.
People really like that car, but I was surprised because this is their first real electric vehicle. So the fact that when you talk about electric vehicles, the number one thing people usually talk about is battery, and as a proxy, range. And the fact that Ford is now basically using this is their first battery operated vehicle for all intents and purposes, I'm surprised they got number one out the gate.
Is this like a Nobel Peace Prize where it's not for the actual achievements, but for the potential to change the world, right? Or is this kind of award actually for customer feedback and their editorial review of this? Like, what do you feel like is the significance of this kind of?
I can tell you what their metrics are. They said in the article, they said that they measured 5 to 6 cars. They had to be fun. They have to have value. They have to fulfill their mission statement, and they have to make EVs more desirable to buyers to a degree that moves the industry forward, they say. So it has to do all those things. So, I mean, to me, there's a lot of cars that suit that bill.
Mach-E. I just don't like that name. It sounds like mockery. It's the Mustang Mach-E.
Nice.
Yeah.
Part of the reason I wanted to bring this whole topic up, and the article was like a good proxy for this, is I'm slowly coming in the market for an EV. Like my gasoline vehicles are reaching their end of life, and so it's a natural point. And Jeremy, I think you just made an upgrade,
I did.
if you could call it that.
Yeah, in some ways, it's definitely an upgrade. Yeah, I traded my Bolt of 4.5 years, which I loved, and in some ways miss now, for a Tesla Model Y. So I have, taken the leap to the autopilot world, and I have been learning how to park in my narrow garage ever since, and I'm still not mastering it. It took me 3 tries last night. And that's the thing I miss most of all about the Bolt is its size and the 360 cam, which if you haven't driven one, you might think is a gimmick. It's not a gimmick.
The drone cam,
yeah.
the way it meshes all the cameras around to look like a aerial view.
Right. Yeah. I tell some people that you told some people that there's a satellite that's locked on my car, and they're kind of like, really? Because it looks like it. It's really good and handy for parallel
parking. It can even
parking.
see you through parking garages.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
X-ray vision.
Exactly. Now the illusion doesn't last forever, but it is it's a great feature that I miss. And in fact, I've ordered a wireless camera license plate frame for the front of the Model Y so that I can see like the bumper cam, because there isn't a bumper cam on Teslas. There's a 3 camera array up by the rear view mirror that looks out over the hood, but it can't see in front of the car. And so that's why I think there isn't just instantaneously a bird's eye view available to Tesla on their UI.
But all you're telling us so far is why you miss your Bolt and not why you actually upgraded. Why the switch? Because you were, I think you said once that you were the first person with a Bolt in San Francisco.
I'd been flirting with it for a while now. I've been flirting with it for a few months. I test drove the new Bolt. I test drove a Model 3. I test drove the ID4. And I just kind of wanted something different. I've had the Bolt for 4.5 years, and there was, I just kind of craved something with more technology, and I just wanted something new. And so I ended up going with the Model Y because I wanted, and this is going to sound crazy, and this is a dangerous topic, but I wanted autopilot, but I wanted autopilot for its current incarnation. What I wanted like previously is full self-driving, as everybody does. Eventually we want to get there. Hopefully we'll see that sometime relatively soon in the next who knows how many years.
5 to 10.
That will be fine. But what I realized when I drove my daughter to camp and back, it was like an 8.5 hour trip, is that I just want I want to hold the wheel, and I want to have my feet on the pedals, and I want to drive the car, but I want the car to also sort of have my back in a way that autopilot does. Really, autopilot right now should be thought of as super cruise control. It's funny because Chevy calls it Super Cruise, which is a better, more appropriate name for what the technology is today. And I realized that I wanted that. Like that's what I just, because at the end of this 9-hour drive, I felt, quite frankly, unsafe. Like my brain was numb. I was not alert, and I needed just to get home.
You needed to pull over.
I should have, exactly. I should have. That's what I should have done. But road trips are not as easy as they used to be. They're a young man's game. And I just wanted the car to sort of be watching the road just as I am watching the road. But the car obviously doesn't blink. It's got 360-degree view, and as long as you treat autopilot the way it should be, it's a life-saving tool. It's a wonderful addition to just being able to do road trips. And we have adaptive. I was just gonna say we have more road trips coming this summer. One to LA in a couple weeks, and I thought, okay, let's take the dive.
Yeah. The adaptive cruise control is not exclusive to Tesla by any means, but that's where it can be. This is one of the cases where staying in your lane is the good thing, and the thing that you can tell the car to do, and you want the car to do. Hey, car, stay in your lane, but also stay a safe distance, predetermined user adjustable distance from the cars ahead of you, or lock into a fixed desirable speed. The range, I think, Kishore, you said range and price are things that a lot of consumers are looking at when they're looking at EVs. But I think the thing that's not often talked enough, and we've certainly have talked a lot about on this podcast as we've adopted EVs, is just the user experience, literally the UX of it and the software interfaces, because there was a learning curve for the driving mechanics for EVs. The first Teslas did not, they drove differently because you have instant torque and you don't have the gradual deceleration, which you can now toggle on, and you can do single pedal driving, but just the interfaces with the cars. And I'm not talking about the lack of physical buttons, but just like the idea that it is software. It's a very heavy software platform, more akin to a phone and a tablet than it is to a fixed piece of machinery that doesn't change. And someone who hasn't driven a Tesla in 2 years or 3 years or something, getting in one 2 years, 3 years later is going to have to go through and learn the software again to where the interface, where the things are, how to open the glove box, and all the different features. Because that's a relatively new thing for cars to have rolling features like this.
I kind of pushed for this topic because I test drove the ID4.
Oh, did you?
Recently as well, and that user experience thing came up. I used to own a Passat years ago, and so I'm used to Volkswagen's quirks. That's the nice way of putting it when it comes to like user interface, and it has like really quirky user interface. I don't think we have hit the point where the interfaces within each of these cars are kind of starting to collide. Like you get into an analog car. I don't know. That's not the right term for it at all. Like your hand knows exactly where to go for like the radio and for like the AC and all that kind of stuff. They might be in slightly different positions, slightly different toggles, but you generally know where to put your hand to do that. Each of these cars is pretty wildly different. I found the ID4 like a little quirkier than the Tesla, so there's a higher learning curve. But as I was sort of talking about it with and my family, and like we were talking about different aspects, like battery is like the first point of discussion, like on range and whatnot. And I think we're all kind of getting to the same point on range. They're all within plus or minus like 10-20%. And once you're at like 250 plus, like does it matter anymore? I don't think it matters that much. The question that keeps getting brought up is like, do you trust this maker because they have enough experience with batteries because they're consumable? And so, I mean, for better or for worse, there seems to be that impression with Tesla because they've been in the game longer. They're going to be better with their batteries. And so somebody in my family made the argument for like the Nissan Leaf because of that, because they've been in it for so long. But have you gotten a new Leaf? I was just like, no, thanks. It just wasn't for me design wise.
Right.
But that's been like my big question with the Volkswagen. Like, this is their first electric car. Are they kind of like spun up to handle this, or should I wait for version 2 when they have more systems kind of in place for it? So that was one element. And the second is what Jeremy was saying. It's like, I'm buying a car. I tend to buy cars with the idea of like, I want something for, 6 to 10 years. So we can joke about 5 to 10 years away, 5 to 10 years away, but you know what's 5 to 10 years away? 6 to 10 years is like the length of a car that you purchase now. And so buying an ID4 or the Mach-E or even like the Polestar, you're not going to get any of those features. And so is that like a waste because I'm not investing in a car that potentially has some of those high-end autopilot features that could be unlocked down the road?
Yeah, just to throw in one quick thing, you mentioned battery being a major consideration, which it is, but you're right. A lot of them hover around 250. Obviously, Teslas with the long range versions, and certainly with the new faster, the Plaid Model S and stuff like that, they're over 400 miles. But the thing about Tesla that's you can't underestimate the importance of is the charging infrastructure, as well as the charging speeds. Like that, they're really unsurpassed. And the Bolt, by comparison, uses the same charging speeds as my old car that I bought 4.5 years ago, which is glacier slow. Like it's just not road trip friendly. People do it, but if they're honest, they tell you it's not something they want to do again. Not only are you stopping relatively frequently, but you are waiting for that car to fill back up. Whereas with the Teslas, especially if you're, below, if you're around 50 or 20% battery, you're going to charge extremely quickly. You can, over what is it like in 20 minutes? You can get like 150 miles if you're charging at the right time.
Easily. And it's like, think about a smartphone, that sweet spot when your phone is between like 25% and 75% charge. Plug it into a high wattage charger will get you a burst in a fast charge. And there are international standards for EVs for high voltage charging, but again, it's the infrastructural network. I think Tesla's talked about opening that up for other car manufacturers. Actually, I know Tesla owners and fans and acolytes and zealots will not want to do, because they want their charging infrastructure to be theirs only. But
they're doing it in Europe, in Norway, and there's one other country, I forget which one. They're doing it. Like, they've already announced that they're doing it. They're getting funding from the government in order to help build out the superchargers. But as a part of that, they will have to support other manufacturers.
And that's what I hope to see here. I hope to see the government come in and lay out plans for charging stations, Tesla or non-Tesla, but so that we have non-exclusive but a widely available, along all the major highways and interstate ways throughout the country, to make road tripping possible. And right now, I think there's that, like you said, that sweet spot at 250 miles. But again, as we've talked about on the show, you can't really think of it as the equivalent of 250 miles rated for with gasoline, because I rarely get the rated miles. I rarely even take it down. I never want to take it down below like 50 miles or so on the battery. At 20 to 10 or 10, 20%, it starts warning you. So you really, even when a car has like a 300 mile rated range, I really think of it as like, that's a 200 mile, before the recharge. And they still encourage you to leave the car plugged in overnight if you can, to regulate the battery.
Yeah, I'd be really interested to hear from listeners how they're approaching the decision around EVs, because like with gasoline cars, it's pretty clear to me. There's design, there's aesthetics, there's price, and size, and you're kind of ready to go. With EVs, it's a more complicated decision matrix right now, and I'd be curious how people are really thinking that through, and what's really sort of rising to the top in it. I think this is like the interesting crux of being the kind of mid adopter. It's not early adopter anymore, but you're in this kind of middle space where things are ramping up. But you're right, the infrastructure isn't quite there to support the network of cars that are coming online.
Yeah. Well, we'll have more on your experiences and your shopping experiences too, Kishore, as you go on this EV quest. And I think we got the name of this podcast already. The name of this episode will be "Stay in Your Lane, Tesla."
And that was going to be "Stay in Your Lane, Loki."
Variant. Breaking news as we're listening to this, Marvel Studios also dropped the first trailer for their What If animated series, coming out August 11th on Disney Plus. So a lot of stuff on that Disney Plus network if you're a subscriber. I forgot to cancel my Apple TV Plus subscription, so I guess I'm watching Ted Lasso at the end of this month as well. Paid them. They got my $5. All right. That's it for the podcast this week. Thank you so much. Good to see you guys. We got to play Demio. The new campaign's out. We got to get together and do some VR, and we'll be back next week with another episode. Have a safe road trip with your car, Jeremy, and we'll hear about your experiences when you get back. All right. I'll play the music. I don't even have it queued up, so we're just going to play it in the edit. See ya. Bye.
Hi there. I didn't see you.
Test it.
Just one story this week. What were you guys doing 1.8 billion years ago?
Floating around the universe in various forms.
Test it.